Hello and welcome back. Thanks for clicking on my face and taking a chance on me. I'm John Stark from mymovieguy.com, and hopefully you click that subscribe button because you look sexy as hell and I want to keep you in my subscriber list. Bet nobody's ever told you that before. Yeah, that's why I'm here. Anyway, I'm a blind film critic, so I really have no idea if you're sexy or not, but it's all about compliments anyway. That's what we do here. We also review movies like Batman Begins, which is available on Max with audio description, of course, because that's where the DC films live. And I've already reviewed The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, and then I did Batman Begins. It's a very weird order. I will admit that I watched these films trying to watch all of Nolan's films. If you do that, if you watch all of Nolan's films, even if you watch them out of order, you do kind of get to see the progression of Nolan. There's a certain thing that sort of happens with him starting out. Obviously, for me, I think Following was a little bit of like proof of concept. Like, guys, look at me, look at what I can do. Please give me money, give me money, give me money. And then got money, and then he did Memento, and Memento was amazing. And he was like, yeah, see what I can do with like 5 million? Why don't you give me even more money? And then Steven Soderbergh fought for him to direct Insomnia, and he did. And he directed the shit out of Al Pacino, Robin Williams, and Hilary Swank. I mean, what a trio. And that was a great film. It was a remake of an already well-reviewed film. And then they were like, you know what? We've got a Batman film for you. And Chris Nolan was like, excuse me? Excuse me, what did you just say? There's a Batman film in my future. And he leapt headfirst into Batman Begins. But I can't kid myself and say that I feel like that this is Nolan, that this is 100% Chris Nolan. I think there's a lot about this film that works because Chris Nolan is directing it. But if you ever read anything about how studios love to interfere, please do, by the way. Just peruse on the internet. There's so many testaments from directors who have had their cuts changed. The studios have come in and been like, we know better than you. And then the theatrical release is poorly reviewed. And, you know, I mean, this whole strike that we're in right now is because non-creatives are telling creatives that they don't matter, which is basically Hollywood. There's always people sitting somewhere in a boardroom who are like, we think Batman should fight like Godzilla. Why hasn't he fought Godzilla yet? I mean, can that be a thing? Can we do that? Like, why isn't that synergy? Can we put that in the movie, please? There's some asshole in the room who's always doing some dumb shit like that. Kevin Smith talked about in his Superman film how he was trying to make the Superman film for Warner Brothers, and they were like, what if Superman fought a giant spider? And Kevin Smith was just like, why? Like, why is he fighting the giant spider? And they were like, I don't know, I think it just looks cool. You know, I mean, it's just like, they don't really have like a reason for it. They're just like, do it. So I think the fact that Nolan got Batman Begins to be out there as much as possible, as good as it is amazing. The problem with Batman Begins is there's two forms of thought here for me. There's the thought of, I remember back in 2005 when this came out and being like, oh my god, this film is amazing. Because it was unlike anything we had seen in the Batman universe. It was a much darker tone to Batman, a much more serious tone to Batman. And if you think about going from Batman and Robin to Batman Begins, I mean, it's like a wild shift in another direction, and even different than other comic book films at the time. I mean, it was darker than the Spider-Man films that Sam Raimi was doing. It was darker than the X-Men films that Bryan Singer was doing. It was darker than, everything. It had a very different appeal to it. It felt like the studio was allowing Nolan to make a more adult comic book film. So to come back around to Batman Begins now, especially having watched Dark Knight Rises, and Batman Begins, I think there's the honoring what Batman Begins was in 2005 to honoring what it is now. It's easier to look back on the film now and say, oh, but this could be different, But at the time, Nolan, I think, had a lot of studio interference and still needed to prove himself, and didn't quite have the power that he had with Dark Knight. It doesn't quite have the Dark Knight feel to it yet. It doesn't quite have all of Nolan's flourishes. It has some of them. It feels a little like, I'm sure there was a studio executive who came in and said a couple things and then left. And I don't know what those couple things are, but I'm guessing if I ask Chris Nolan, is this 100% you? He'd probably be like, yeah, it's about 90% me. It's like, this is about 90% what I wanted. And no, I don't think the 10% is Katie Holmes. I don't think that's the problem. I've rewatched this film, and I do not think Katie Holmes is the problem here. Yes, she's a very different Rachel Dawes than Maggie Gyllenhaal. Fine. That doesn't make her bad. It just makes her different. Katie Holmes did not give a bad performance here as Rachel Dawes. For people who just, I don't know, are stuck on Katie Holmes can never leave the creek. I have no idea, but it's not her fault. She's not the problem here. If I had to really pinpoint now, in 2023, almost 20 years later, what I can look back and say, oh, what would have made this film stronger now would be the fact that we had so many villains in this film. It almost bucked the trend of comic book films. In most comic book films, the first film out, you really only focus on, it's the hero up against one villain. It's the hero that is learning to sort of be the hero, but they're doing it up against one, and it's already hard enough for them to defeat one villain. And then you get the sequels where they take it like literally, and they feel like, well, this is the second film, so they need two, and this is the third film, so they need three. Like Spider-Man, poor Spider-Man, poor Tobey Maguire just kept adding. He had three villains there at the end. So, he starts out with Batman arguably has to fight not just Ra's al Ghul, but two versions of Ra's al Ghul, by the way. Spoiler alert, but I guess two versions of Ra's al Ghul. So it's like two different villains, or like two people he has to fight in this film that claim to be Ra's al Ghul. He has to fight Scarecrow, and he has to also fight Carmine Falcone. And this film is presented as a villain, like just the regular sort of street thug. When you cast somebody at the level of Tom Wilkinson, you can't say it's a throwaway role. Tom Wilkinson is a fantastic actor. So you can't be like, oh, well, that role wasn't really meant to be it's not really meant to be a main role. It's meant to be, it's something. It's a role. It's the leader of a crime family that is pretty prominent throughout the course of the film. I would say that's something, at least. So I wouldn't, wouldn't push against that. There's also some really interesting references. There's the Zaz reference, which I totally had forgotten was in this film at the beginning of the film when Scarecrow, Jonathan, whatever, is on the stand and he's defending somebody named Zaz, and just a missed opportunity at another villain for another time. a villain we never get to see in the Nolan universe. So, at least not in any sort of form related to his comic book standing. But yeah, it does feel like he's got a lot on his plate. Plus, there's also that internal. Bruce has a lot of internal struggle dealing with himself and dealing with regret and, his parents. And that's another thing about these movies. And we've now seen like multiple Batmen, and it's sort of like the thing with Spider-Man. One of the reasons why I love Spider-Man Homecoming so much is we didn't have to see Uncle Ben die for like the 87th time. Just thank God. I mean, at a certain point, just assume we know. Assume that the audience is fine and conceptually understands these heroes. You can make passing references to them, but we don't need this whole film would have been so much better if it was not steeped in, the family drama of living up to your father's expectations. But that's only because apparently Warner Brothers is never going to stop making Batman films. So the films that highlight that fill that void of, daddy didn't love me. Did daddy love me? I don't know. that whole storyline of Bruce's, they're just not going to age as well as the ones where somebody is bold enough to say, I think you know who Batman is. Here's Batman. Enjoy. And they're being a little bit more like that now. They can be, arguably, because of people like Chris Nolan and Tim Burton, who did run into that storyline already, who did talk about the parents, and even the TV series Gotham. I mean, things like that make it easier for things later, but the things later feel like they get to have more creative freedom right out of the gate. So it's a tough world to be in, because I look at this film 2023, but I also think about where was I in 2005. In 2005, I loved the hell out of this film. I didn't know there were going to be sequels. I didn't know Heath Ledger was going to be the damn Joker. You know what I'm saying? I had no idea what was going to come from this film. I was just like, oh my God, this Batman. Oh my God. And so it's so true. But looking at the film critically now, I would say there are too many villains in this film. I would say the film spends way too much time. One of the reasons I don't watch this as much as I do the other Dark Knight films is actually the whole Ra's al Ghul storyline. At the end of the day, it didn't play out for me in a way that I wanted to watch it over and over. It's a nice finish for the series, but it's also, Talia becomes the least interesting thing for me about Dark Knight Rises. I much prefer Bane's storyline to Talia's. So there's something about their storyline that just, the fact that in a weird way they sort of become the centralized villain of the Dark Knight trilogy, the League of Assassins, to me is just, I don't know. Of all of the Batman villains that we've had over the years, of all the people who could have been in these films, it just, I don't know. There's a reason why I don't watch Batman Begins as much as I do The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Dark Knight Rises is way newer, and I've seen it way more times than I have Batman Begins. So there's got to be a reason for that. And the closest thing I can come to is I just really just don't enjoy the Ra's al Ghul storyline. I think there's too many villains, and I think if this was Batman versus Scarecrow with a touch of Carmine, so that way Scarecrow can be using Carmine for his own nefarious deeds, and also, then propel himself to the top of the villain. I think that would be a stronger film. But it feels like we've got two Batman films that were slammed together into one, and it's just not as it's not as easily flown together as The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is just beautifully made, beautifully done. Um, it's one coherent plot all the way through. This is a little bit of a mess. I did love it when it first came out, and I didn't know there was going to be any more Batman from Nolan, or what his Batman would look like. So I don't want to just completely admonish this film in sort of a Monday morning quarterback type role, but at the same time, if I had to say why don't I watch this film as much, those would be the reasons why. It's not the performances. Christian Bale's really good here. Michael Caine is, Alfred is just exactly Alfred, the same Alfred that he's always Alfred. I don't know. He just lives to be Alfred. Morgan Freeman sets up a really nice Lucius Fox here. A little bit underutilized, but Lucius has never been the star of the franchise anyway. He's always been a peripheral character, and it's a good performance from him. I said I like Katie Holmes in this role. There's an innocence about her that works to her advantage in this. The universe is so dark. It's so dark and hopeless at times that there's something about Katie's... she has a little bit more of that doe-eyed optimism to her than Maggie Gyllenhaal does. Maggie Gyllenhaal, by the time we get to her version of Rachel, very much has more of that fucking attitude. God, yeah, Gotham. Like she's gonna go smoke a pack afterwards, you know? Just, I can't deal with this shit anymore, you know? It's the difference between Linda Hamilton from the first Terminator and the second Terminator. It's like, that's still the same Linda Hamilton, but there's a very big difference. Like, stuff has happened. So, that's kind of the difference between Katie and Maggie Gyllenhaal. Is Katie Holmes feels like Linda Hamilton from the Terminator, and then Maggie feels like her from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So I like it. I love Tom Wilkinson. I think he's such an underrated actor, and just deserved tons of Oscar nominations and throughout his career, but didn't get any. And I think like little cameos like what Rutger Hauer in here. I mean, that's fun. That's a fun cameo. It's a fun little piece for him to be in. Not really a cameo, but it's a small piece. Cillian Murphy is a great Scarecrow because he is he's so intelligent when he needs to be, and then also creepy as hell when he needs to be. It's what I love about Red Eye. It's that same dynamic. Cillian works that really well. Cillian has that charm and that smile, and then he also, in that same charm and smile, can creep the hell out of you. And it's so perfect casting for him as Scarecrow, because he doesn't have to do a whole lot. He doesn't have to overact or overthrow himself into a role or completely change. He basically stays as who he is. Liam Neeson's fine as this. It's not my favorite storyline. I just don't, I don't know. I don't know that I like that path for him. And obviously Ken Watanabe is just way underutilized here. I don't even feel like commenting on his performance. So, yeah, it's fine. So I like it. It's not my favorite Batman film. It's actually my least favorite of the three by a little bit. But really, I like all Nolan films. Like, it's really hard to differentiate. But there are some... Basically, there's two that I wouldn't give an A to. And then there's everything else where it's just like, is it an A or an A minus? And it's very weird for me because in 2005, I would have given this an A. 10 out of 10, loved it. Didn't know there was any more coming down the road. Now I look at it, now I see what else could have been and what Nolan had in store. You know, it's like he made me a great sandwich with Batman Begins. And I was like, oh my God, this sandwich is great. And then he came back and I got like this 5-course meal, you know, prepared for like a Michelin star level. In the next one, I was like, wait a minute, I could have had this? What's going on here? So, but I'm trying to remind myself that I really like that sandwich. But there's also a reason why I don't revisit that sandwich as much. All of that considered, considering the grade, it's as for the audio description, just like the other films, I think the audio description here is really well done. I think they did them probably all at the same time. I think they went back through and added audio description to make sure these films all had them. At some point along the way, maybe when Dark Knight Rises was doing it, they decided to do the other films. But it's good audio description, and it doesn't reveal its hand at all. It doesn't push anything with the Ra's al Ghul storyline. It doesn't throw any of that around on you. I don't know, it highlights everything that it needs to. It highlights when, you know, Batman is learning to be Batman, so he doesn't quite make all of the jumps in the beginning, you know, when he first runs into Gary Oldman as Gordon, and he's trying to escape, but clearly he forgot his gear. Like, he thought, you know, I'm just going to walk in here in this suit and talk to Gordon. That's good enough, right? And he actually has to escape, and he's like, shit, I didn't think this out. Yeah, it has a lot of really great action sequences, and it describes Scarecrow's nightmares pretty well. From what I remember, because I have seen this film a couple of times, not to the extent of the other two, to where I visually remember everything about it, but yeah, I did remember the maggots part, that she sees Scarecrow's mask with, like, covered in maggots. It was pretty nightmarish. I mean, for, like, little kids, you know, do I take my little kid to see this? I don't know. I don't know your kid. You know, Scarecrow can be freaky. So yeah, it's I thought the audio description was really well done for this. Anyway, it's time for me to tap out. I've talked a lot about Batman. I wore my Batman shirt for this. For those of you who can't see, I'm wearing a Batman logo. This is how much I love Batman, and I got ready for this today. For those of you who are not sighted, I don't really have a lot of flourishes. There's no intro video. There's no edits. There's no cut. I don't have a producer. This is the best I can do, is match a t-shirt to the video I'm reviewing. This is what I get. So I'm going to give Batman Begins an A-, with the full acknowledgement that if I was time traveling and then we were in 2005 and you were watching this review right now, you would see me fanboying all over this movie, and I'd be like, oh my god, this is an A. You know, yes, I know that was me. But, damn, it's like when you see the stakes that are raised, you're just like, damn, okay. About that other film, a little bit before this one. Anyway, it's funny how sequels are like that. Like, the first film, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then the sequel benefits so much from what the first film is that it becomes perfect. When you do it right, the sequels are really undervalued. Yes, so anyway, those are my thoughts on Batman Begins. I've almost seen all of Nolan's films again, thanks to Oppenheimer. And please subscribe. And I also have a website, MacTheMovieGuy.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads at MacTheMovieGuy. You can go to the audio description project, adp.acb.org. It'll let you know what is audio description and where you can watch it. And you can go to the ADNA.org, that's the ADNA.org, where you can look up your favorite films and television shows and see who's narrating them. That's it for me today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of the family. I'm going to watch something else, review it, and see you guys on the other side.